Welcome back to another episode of Into the Airbnb, where we talk with Airbnb hosts about their short-term rental experience. In this episode, we welcome Jessica Fontenot-Simms, an Airbnb superhost from Ludowici, Georgia, who rents 2 bedrooms in her primary residence. Today, she'll tell us about her story and journey on Airbnb and how to make out of short-term rentals a source of passive income. This episode is sponsored by Airbnb, short-term rental analytics for high-return investments, comprehensive data for insights, ideas, and inspiration. Go to app.airbnb.com to find precise Airbnb data such as occupancy rate, revenue, average daily rate, and so on. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, can you tell me how did you got started with Airbnb and short-term rentals?
So my husband is active duty in the Army, and we used to live on post, and we obviously couldn't do Airbnb there. And I also happened to get into an accident in our apartment on post, and the trauma of that I just couldn't stay there. So then we began house hunting, and we found our home last year, and I just had reconstructive surgery when we moved in. So I knew I'd be out of work for a while, and I was also finishing up with my bachelor's degree. So we decided to utilize the other 2 bedrooms in our home as a source of additional income. And that way it kind of doubled into me having something productive to do in my spare time. And it was really fun putting together the rooms and finding little complimentary ways I could enhance them for my guests, and stayed in Airbnbs ourselves in the past, some that were really lackluster. And so I knew that I could offer an affordable, accommodating stay that was unmatched when compared to places we've stayed in the past. And given our age, we're both 23 now, but given our age when we were dating and all of that, we couldn't stay in hotels because we weren't old enough. So Airbnb was our go-to if we could find them.
So, have you been an Airbnb user since the very beginning of it?
No, so we actually moved into our house a little over a year ago, and we've been doing Airbnb since then.
So, around 2021, right?
Well, we moved into our house last year in 2022, early last year.
Okay, great.
Or this year's
Uh-huh.
2022. I'm
Yes,
sorry,
that's right.
2021. Yes. I'm ahead of myself
And
here.
and how has been your hosting experience early after the pandemic?
How has been my hosting experience during the pandemic?
Early after the pandemic, I mean, how was the situation during the pandemic when you started doing hosting?
I mean, surprisingly, the world didn't stop. I mean, everyone still had things to do. Everyone still traveled for work. We have a fiber plant down the road, and they employ a bunch of interns from a college out in Florida. That's where quite a few of my guests have come from. And then military families, especially being between that plant and a military installation, they're going to travel regardless. We've had plenty of military members stay here as well, waiting for housing. So, I mean, we haven't lost business just because of the pandemic. We've just taken extra precautions to make sure the rooms are clean and sanitized, and that our guests have, things like hand sanitizer and antibacterial wipes if they need them.
Okay, that's great. So it wasn't that bad when you started hosting, right? It was
No,
actually going
no,
down, right?
right. No, not at all. We made a decent bit of money just passively doing this.
Okay, that's great. And when you both bought the house, were you already thinking of doing Airbnb with it?
We had actually discussed doing Airbnb before, when we were living on base, but like I said, you can't have a business like that when you're on post. So we had discussed it before, and it was always kind of like in the back of our heads, if push ever came to shove and we needed the extra income, we do it. But now it's kind of just like we do it passively, and it gets us by. So
Okay, and if it's not too personal, can you tell me if it has help you pay, for example, the mortgage of the house you bought?
So actually, we don't really rely on Airbnb as a source of income for our mortgage or anything like that because with my husband being in the military, we already get benefits that pay for our mortgage essentially. Like I said, it's just extra income for us, and we just kind of put it up into savings or buy this and that. Now, the Airbnb money has, in a way, provided for us to have the nicer things in life. So we are very fortunate to that fact, but Airbnb does not provide our bills for us.
Okay, I understand. And can you tell us a little bit of what are the benefits on mortgage that you have as your husband being in the military in case other military families are interested in doing Airbnb as well?
Well, other military families know that they get stipend, if you will, to pay for rent or mortgage wherever they decide to either live on post, rent a house off post, or buy a house. We chose to buy a house because typically mortgages are cheaper than rent. Whoever may be listening that's in the military is aware of the fact that they get a stipend for their housing. Of course, Airbnb helps with bills if we need it, but mainly most of our Airbnb money goes into just our savings account or, like I said, buying our shed outside or putting a down payment on a new vehicle. It doesn't really pay for, our utility or gas or water or our mortgage.
I understand completely. Thanks for sharing that with us. And
Sure.
can you tell us, with the current state of your market, how is your Airbnb business doing?
In the year that we've been doing this, we haven't had but probably one slow season, and that was really strictly our fault anyways. We had blocked out our calendar to allow her family to come stay with us for a couple of weeks to visit because our family's 13 hours away. And from the time of like March through September, we're completely solid booked out. And then we may have one or two miniature slow seasons in between, and that may last a month or so. And in that time, we're not really bothered by it because it's nice to have the house to ourselves every once in a while and take that little hiatus. But other than that, we typically have guests come and go, especially during the summer months. The plant up the road is hiring for the interns, and military families are taking leave or coming in waiting for housing, or family members are coming in visiting military members. So we stay pretty solid booked out.
Okay, so summer is high season for you, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And then we're perfect relative distance between Brunswick and the Jekyll Island area and
Mm-hmm.
Savannah and the Tybee Island area. So it's not too far from the touristy side of everything to really make a huge difference in our numbers.
So you have a good location then. That's great. And can you tell me, during the high season, how many minimum nights do you keep?
So for the high season, usually this is the second year in a row that we've had our long-term stayers. Like I said, like right now, for example, I have a guest who is interning at that plant. So she is here all summer as a long-term guest. So all of my nights are booked out for the next 3 months. And the gentleman that's in the military, he's actually here on a contract to work on the base as a civilian contractor. So he's also booked out through September. So all of our nights are absolutely booked.
Oh, so you have not, for example, 1 week minimum stay, one like 2 days. It's usually long term, right?
Not usually. I allow for long terms. I'll vet the guests who may acquire to stay long term. And if I'm comfortable with their stay, I'll allow it. But we do have guests that travel overnight or a week or a little bit longer than that.
And so it's more usual to get short term stays, right?
During the slower or off seasons, yes, we'll get short term
Mhm.
stays.
Okay, I see. And for example, for the longer stays, what kind of background check do you run on your guests to be comfortable with them for, all this time they're going to stay at your house with you?
Right. So obviously, Airbnb has their own parameters for allowing people to create accounts. And that's, uploading a government issued ID, et cetera, et cetera. I particularly vet my own guests and just ask, what their reasoning for coming into town is, how long they'll be staying. Usually they're all pretty responsible. They typically give me straight up answers on what they're doing here, why they're coming here, what their work day is going to be like. A lot of my guests aren't here throughout the day, they're working all day and then they're here in the evenings. But if I get, even an ounce of uncomfortableness, I won't accept it just because, that this is my home, my investment. If I don't really find a good reason for you to be here, if you're already asking for certain amenities or discounts or stuff like that, you're kind of taken away from the fact that other people realistically should be here.
I understand. And with the current Airbnb policy, do you think this is going to be harder to do for you?
So far from what I've heard, with them completely revamping their policies and procedures, it is taking a hit on a lot of hosts.
Hmm.
However, I've already learned from my mistakes and I've had to change my cancellation policy to strict or non-refundable, and that gives them a discount for their stay. And I'm perfectly comfortable with that discount, but I've had numerous guests request to stay, and then leading up to that reservation, even just as much as hours before they're supposed to check in, they'll cancel and they get all of their money back. And that money's not there anymore that you're relying on or you're expecting to come in.
Hmm.
So I've tailored my listing for that reason. So I do have a strict non-refundable cancellation policy. However, I understand that there are circumstances that would allot or allow for a refund, and I'm understanding of that. And I'm more than happy to come to a resolution with any guests that may be having an issue or an extenuating circumstance that may or may not be covered by Airbnb.
Yeah, I understand. And what would be, for example, the reasons for you to accept to do a full refund of the stay or even half of it?
For example, there was a gentleman who requested, I think it was like a month long stay, if I'm not mistaken. And he booked it without realizing that the listing was non-refundable, and he decided that he was going to speak with his superiors to make sure that the contract was indeed viable and that he would be here at the dates that he said because he wasn't exactly sure. He booked that reservation and then realized that it was non-refundable and he had to cancel it. I did give him probably about 75% of his money back, which it wasn't too much, and he was happy that I was able to do that, and I was more than happy to do that for him. But when you're expecting money to come in and you've had those days blocked for X amount of days, you could have booked them within that time. And, like I said, I've had people cancel last minute, and it's unfortunate because you're expecting that money. Not that you're necessarily relying on that money, but you're running a business. And there's been other times too where, I've told a guest that had to leave suddenly or had to cancel because of contract cancellation or a work cancellation that I would be more than happy to refund them based on the dates that get rebooked. And I've did that quite a few times for guests as well.
Now, I would like to ask you of your open calendar days, how much would be your occupancy rate during, the lower season and the high season as well?
So percentage wise, during our high season, our occupancy rate is 100% without a doubt. In the slow seasons, we may typically have at least one room booked out, and whether that's lodging overnight for a few days or just for a week or two for family that's just visiting or individuals passing through. And then again, we may cancel or we may block out the dates for a week or two for family to come in or visit. But the additional income pales in comparison to just a couple of weeks of downtime with your loved ones. So, and that's the great thing about this industry is that there are no commitments to each particular guest. You're not dealing with a roommate. It's strictly business. You can block dates, take a hiatus, have some extra spending money, and everything's still okay. it's a fantastic source of passive income if you don't mind doing what we do, home sharing.
If you don't mind talking about numbers, can I know how much would be your revenue? It can be either monthly or annual, whatever you want to talk about.
For example, because I change my rates often, just when I notice that obviously supply and demand, right? So if you know that you're peaking up on the summer season, you're going to raise your rates a little bit. You know that slower
Mm-hmm.
season's coming, you're going to drop your rates a little bit. And for special circumstances, especially for military members, I really try to utilize a military discount because, we're a military family ourselves. And for, healthcare workers and people of that nature, cops, military members, nurses, I try to provide discounts, and I really don't tell them that I'm providing a discount, but I'll kind of adjust their nightly rate so that they save a little extra money. But so it wouldn't really be accurate to tell you how much I make monthly because I do change my rates every now and then. But just a really rough gross income of last year, for example, we made almost $20,000. And that was just, like I said, passively.
Passive income during, whole year, right?
Right. That was about what we made last year.
Okay, those are good numbers to be honest. And what about your expenses? What kind of expenses do you have, like precisely for Airbnb? And how much would them be, yearly?
You know, I don't really factor in expenses necessarily, just really for the simple fact that, for example, last year Airbnb didn't have, from what I could tell, a security deposit option. Now Airbnb implements security deposits, which is a great, great, great tool getting money from a guest that you don't technically receive, but if anything were to happen, damages, anything of that nature, you are able to delve into that money to replenish whatever was lost. I don't have a budget for like detergent, toilet paper, anything like that. That's just me though. I don't own multiple Airbnbs where I have to
Mm-hmm.
budget my monthly expenses. I
Mm-hmm.
just kind of roll with it. So,
Yeah, I completely understand. And can you talk a little bit about your experience as home sharing host? How is your experience with home share? How do you deal with it? Have you have any problem? Or anything you can really tell us, like the general.
and I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'll go ahead and say my piece about it, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll be very controversial, and that's okay because this, at the end of the day, this is my home, this is my investment. We don't plan on staying here forever, and I want to be able to sell our house when we move back to where we originated from. We have to take into consideration the fact that my husband is military. At any given point in time, he could leave me for 9 months or 2 weeks. I am also disabled. I am pregnant. I'm a female, and I'm allowing strangers into my home. And so we do have security cameras set up outside the premises at the doorbell, and two in our living room. Well, one in our living room and one in the kitchen. And it's very, very controversial. But at the end of the day, those cameras protect me from liability, protects my guests in case anything were to happen. And at the end of the day, they have saved me on many of occasions. We had a guest, for example, say that they tripped I think they said something about tripping over a chair in the dining area. And, the cameras, they didn't catch anyone tripping. I've also had a few guests trip over certain stuff in the living room, like a dog bed, and try to get a full refund for it. And it's just like the cameras caught you not paying attention and you're trying to, get a full refund because of your ignorance. So, as controversial as it may be, my cameras serve a purpose. I'm not sitting there watching my guests all day. I don't have time to do that. I'm here most of the time, so I don't need to watch my guests. And it's just a little ridiculous and redundant to have to say that everywhere you go publicly, you're videotaped, you're monitored. Even if you go to a hotel, you're monitored.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for hosts to know that they should be allowed to protect their investment. these cameras, like I said, have caught numerous instances in favor of me. Just like I'm sure there's a bunch of hosts that may have situations where a guest won't leave. We've had a few guests who blatantly told us to house the next guest coming in after them in another room that was already booked. And, we wouldn't have known that they were still here had we not had those security cameras up. So they do help no matter what other people may think.
Yeah, I understand why it's controversial, but I also can fully understand why you have them. Like I can
Right.
comprehend 100%. So guests usually agree with this, right? When they book your place, right?
Oh, yeah. And I've never had a single complaint from any guest. Honestly, I don't even think that they really care that they're there. They don't acknowledge them at all, really. Because it's not like they're right in your face or they make any sort of noises or anything like that. They're in the corner. You don't really see them. They're kind of out of the way, out of your mind. And you don't really have time to sit there and watch what people are walking around your house doing. When you get 100 something notifications of movement a day, you're not sitting there watching it. You just want the notifications to stop, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think it's a little comical that the argument is perceived by stalking your guests. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but I can see why people would think about it. Not every host is, in your position, and there are some hosts that
Oh,
would like
100%.
to use the cameras to do, not weird stuff, but definitely would check a lot more on their guests, right? For that.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And it's really, really weird. And I don't even think, even as much as I agree with my house having cameras, I know
Mm-hmm.
that I wouldn't want it to be watched or perceived as me being watched in another Airbnb. But when you're home sharing, and I'll say this, if I had a house that, we didn't live in, I'd probably put up, outdoor cameras and stuff. But I don't think I'd worry too much about putting cameras in the house. But since we live here, this is our home, it's really just a matter of liability and protection for us.
Yeah, I fully understand. And thank you a lot for talking about this. So we're running out of time. So lastly, I would like to ask you about the challenges that you have encountered as an Airbnb host, and also for you to share some tips, if you have any of them, for other people who might be interested in running home share listings.
Sure, yeah. The biggest challenge for me that I've come in contact with is the very, very few people that you can just never really please, no matter how affordable your unit is, no matter how many small sentimental touches you add, no matter how nice the conversations are, no matter how accommodating you can be, there will always be those that you just can't satisfy, and that's okay. We're all in the hospitality business here, and that's one of the negative consequences, but it's really important for other hosts to know that it's your business, your investment, your home, your rules. I encourage all hosts to stick to their rules. It's always great to offer a little discount here and there, be nice, do this and that, but many people take advantage of those acts of kindness and end up being some of the worst type of guests, destroying comforters, asking for a refund because the temperature isn't just to their specifications, or just outright lying about you and your listing. And you have to be prepared to combat those kind of individuals. So those have been some of the most negative experiences, but they're very few and far in between. We don't deal with those very often. And then tips, most seasoned hosts know that they've had to adapt their listing to reflect challenges that they've come across in the past. Things like adding new rules, discontinuing old rules, improving your rooms for the guests, changing old habits like using white towels to finding something more stain resistant or easier to clean. One of the things that I've adapted that's been my favorite so far is changing our lock system at our front door. We've integrated from having to give out individual keys to our guests and having them lose them all the time to investing in one of the Schlage encode locks. So I can put up to 80 combinations in there. I can have it on a schedule. It gets deleted after the guest leaves automatically. I don't have to worry about it. It's done and over with. It's really important for hosts to be able to run their business smoother and save as much money as possible. Even if you're operating only one Airbnb, rising inflation costs are hitting everyone right now. Many seasoned hosts typically run more than one Airbnb and will tell you that that's just the cost of business. Just move on and forget about it. But running one will have you protecting your investment a lot more closely. And other hosts do typically make enough money to just chalk it up to a lost towel or a ruined pair of sheets and just go out and buy more. But there's nothing wrong with starting an air cover request to replace lost merchandise that came out of your own pocket, or like I mentioned before, accepting a security deposit for instances as such. And, you know, things happening in your house is going to happen, but you can be prepared for it and you can replenish those things and fix those things. And it's all materialistic, but if you can help run your business smoother and run it more efficiently and more cost efficient, you got a good thing going, passively at least.
Yes, I fully understand. And that is a great tip. And it's the first time hearing about it. All of my interviews, yeah, it's my first time hearing about it. So it's great that you've talked about it. So thank you a lot for your time and for your tips. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And yeah, that'll be it for today.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Into the Airbnb. We're looking for hosts and other people in the short-term rental industry to interview. If you have what we need and would like to share your experience in this podcast, please send us an email. All the info is at the end of the description.